So awesome.
We're back. Week 2. Unfortunately, we're going to have to get pretty real with people on this episode because I made a huge mistake on the weekend. Probably went a bridge too far, some would say. But it's going to make great show content. I know Alexander was fired up about it. Now, before I get into this, Alexander just asked me about my shirt. It's what I was telling you about. It's Harry Potter and Snape posted up. It's such a heavy shirt. Like, it's not that hot out. What is it right now? Okay, it's 82 degrees outside. I'm on the second floor. This room is so hot. It's unbelievably hot. It's the fact that I'm not like dripping sweat is really just a kudos to my system for holding strong right now, because it is, dude, it's like 95 degrees in this room.
At least, Snape has got some drip, got the chains. He's looking like Justin Jefferson out there,
Yeah, cool.
Same with Harry. I
Like
mean,
an
Harry's,
H-pot, man.
oh, man.
That's right. Yeah, this is, I stumbled across this classic Facebook ad. You got me, Zuckerberg, you son of a, it was a Facebook ad, and I kept like stumbling across it. And my wife just, every year can never find me a birthday or Christmas gift because I literally want for nothing and ask for nothing, make no lists, nothing. There's no possible way you could find anything to get me. And I just happened to comment on this like designer company's page on Facebook. I never post on Facebook ever. Get a bunch of birthday. I just turned a certain age recently, just had a birthday, and got all these comments, responded to no one. Thank you, everybody. And then I commented on this like designer's page. I was like, hey, once upon a time, like 2 days ago, I was on your site and saw this shirt and described it. And I go, I cannot find it now. Of course, they never got back to me because they don't care. And then I never found the shirt again. And this was in September around my birthday. And then next thing I know, Christmas rolls around. And this was in a gift box because my wife saw me post on Facebook and saw what I said and then found the shirt on there and bought it. So that's how I ended up with the shirt. So, props to her for following through on something that I had pretty much given up on. So,
Amazing.
Anyways, all right. Well, going back to the leadoff of the show, Alexander and I, in an effort to get this show right, are working on some of the commentary that we received from listeners on the last show. Some people had mentioned that we're doing a trade show, which is part of what we're doing now, player predictive analysis and trade content in one. But some of you said, hey, we don't know what the trade is. We're just hearing you talking about players. And I admittedly forgot this is also a podcast. So correction will be made there. But really, the major thing that came up was this weekend, I took it upon myself. I have not announced this on social media yet. On Twitter X, it hasn't been announced yet. But for those of you that are listeners to the show, to the program, on the Discord, watched the episode last week, YouTube throttled us, then you would be aware of the fact that our trade calculator rankings website are live. So what do? Naturally, I want to share it with the world except X because I'm not ready to say it there. And I decide what's the best place to take. What is the most level-headed, normal, kind, well-spoken, just a great group of people, like the nicest group of people you could ever find. Reddit, of course. Like, that's the first place that comes to mind, right? So, of course, I take it to Reddit, and I show Alexander. Within like 4 minutes of it going up, the first guy's a total dick, and he's like, I'll just have to show you the post. Let's just go to it because this is really the driver of the episode. So let's switch screens here. Oh, click of a button, not gonna work. Let's try this one. Wait,
one more time.
Wait here. Okay, that one worked. Thank God.
There we go.
I'm gonna have to open this thing up and start pushing buttons and stuff. Oh, look at that.
Gotta love just JSN staring into my eyes right now.
Yeah, just right off the background there. All right,
right
so
off
hold
the
on.
rip.
Yeah, we got him. Let's see here. Hold on. Let me pull this back up. So we got the trade calculator, and here we go. So, do I have a sound that I can play before this? I don't have any good sounds. I think I played all my good sounds Well, no, I got some that I haven't played yet. All right, so here we go. At an outraged Jew on Dynasty FF. Again, just a real swell group of people, by the way. Built a new Dynasty trade calculator. Would love this community's feedback. So essentially, in my kindest, humble, made myself small and entered the room, bent knee, I walked in and said, guys, would you be interested in checking out what we've done? We think it's pretty great. Could use some of your feedback. First guy didn't like that. Naturally, what I did was decided to clean it up and feed it to ChatGPT. Now, let's go over something before we go over really what's going on here. If you don't say that you use ChatGPT or AI for at least 30% of the things you do, you are full of crap. I use AI for a million things. Now, admittedly, probably should have put a little more human into this, knowing I was going into the teeth of Reddit. But I said, hey, let the GPT give it a little cleanup, and I'll use that. First guy. So 6 comments, because I think this thing got downvoted pretty fast. First guy. Oh, no, this isn't the one, but let's, where was he at? Okay, here you go. Why would I spend time and effort to give feedback if you can't be arsed to write a little blurb for your post and you just give us a few lines of GPT slop? That was literally the first post. 10 upvotes, by the way. 10 upvotes. There's a place where you'll all go later. And these people upvote that comment, right? So I respond to the guy and I'm like, understood. Probably could have typed it out normally. And then what he really wants is me to explain in a paragraph what is going on within the formula behind the rankings in the trade calculator. And I couldn't do that during a TED Talk. There's way too much to explain to do in the post. So I don't know how I was supposed to do that. But Alexander, from here, let's start with this post right here and your general sentiment about the commentary that we did receive, because I think this thing vanished out of the eyesight of people on there quickly, but it got a ton of traffic.
Yeah, got a ton of traffic. I definitely was just a little perplexed. I think that's just sometimes there's just so much recency bias. And I was definitely pretty frustrated to see these kind of this kind of negligence to like recency and stuff like that. But going looking at this, I think that this is just someone that's trying to go and look at this stuff. We look at players at a 3-year window. I think maybe explaining that would helpful, but in terms of like viewing this stuff, QBs are very valuable in Superflex last time I checked. So it's hard to disagree with the sentiment that QBs aren't valuable. And so stating that like London equals Fields on a points per game basis, I'm assuming that you want points. Fields most likely will score a higher points per game than London. I would say the same about Danny Dimes equaling DK and Javonte. So, yeah, I just don't know if I agree. I think sometimes it's just people just trying to have some fun. And, Kyle Pitts is a meme. So I understand that, but I don't understand.
The Danny Dimes thing, like, again, this was before he had played last week. So this was after 1 week of Danny Dimes. So this was Saturday. So nobody had seen what was going to happen Sunday yet. So nobody was really aware of outcomes. But yeah, to your point, Justin Fields, we talked about it last week. Obviously Fields, different outcome last week. But this is the problem with recency bias as a whole. And we're going to go over this because I know we want to talk about like JJ McCarthy and some other players. It's like every year, and this is the worst, it's fantasy analysts that are doing this. Every single year you spend all offseason talking about these players that are going to blow up and this rookie class, and you stake your claim. And some people admittedly are fantastic. They do all the research. They do all the homework. They write articles. They have a wealth of information to support the origin of their take. Then there's other guys that say for an entire length of summer, so-and-so is going to take off this year. And then it's like a clip of him like eating a hamburger in the passenger side of a Honda Accord as they zip by. And it's like, how could you know that you've done no homework? And then week 1 comes and the guy does great. He plays awesome. And then all of a sudden, it is like victory lap city, right? And unfortunately, Danny Dimes is remembered for everything he did prior to this season, just like Baker Mayfield was remembered for everything he did prior to going to the Bucs. And so, to your point earlier when we were talking about this like correlation, there's another one in here that Danny Dimes comes up, and we can get to it. But the idea that I want people to think about is you're looking at this in such a small, narrow window. We won't even know who these players are this year for another couple of weeks. Like target share distribution, quarterback play, injuries, defenses. Like some teams have played really hard schedules already, and the outcomes have been flipped. So it's just interesting to read after 1 week of football, people making definitive arguments like what they're doing right here. Knicks for Jefferson. Now, I understand for a lot of people, they don't feel like it's an equitable trade, Knicks for Jefferson. And in a lot of places, Jefferson is rated much more highly than Knicks. And I think he's still higher than Knicks on our rankings by a decent amount. I'd have to pull it up and look. But I understand what they're trying to say. It's just we're going to tend to disagree because quarterbacks are going to be more valuable in Superflex. And then you see what Knicks did this last week, and who's he throwing the ball to? I mean, I go back to this sometimes. He's not throwing to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. It's like Franklin, Sutton, Mims, right? Like, isn't that worth something?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, what Pat Bryant is who they invested a pick in, like another old veteran wide receiver, not old veteran wide receiver, but an older prospect out of Illinois. The team has not really done enough outside of having Cortland Sutton and maybe Marvin Mims. Troy Franklin is an interesting player, but he's not. They haven't invested a lot, and Bo Nix is doing a lot with less. I think that just so much like bias from like Nix when he was like a prospect, in college. Him playing at Auburn took a while, had to flip schools, went to Oregon and only set the record for completion percentage and was extremely prolific. I just think that like it's some of this bias even carries over from like college, even though like last year Bo Nix was fantastic. And he was a guy that was consistently going at the end of first and second round picks. And why wouldn't you want a guy that is tied to Sean Payton, right, in this scheme, and is doing the most with the least and has some rushing ability and upside that maybe some of these other guys don't have. And, I look at, similar players, Justin Herbert, a little bit bigger, but the same relatively rushing floor, the arm talent, and the efficiency. I think that's why I would still highly value Bo Nix in Superflex, because why wouldn't you? It's Superflex.
I don't know. And there's always going to be this game. For some reason, it's an argument of what would their market value be worth. Now, Bo Nix has clearly ascended from last year. I think if you come out of the gates hot as a rookie, you're often held to higher regard and given a longer leash in the eyes of people, market value assessment. But it's funny because oftentimes, point for point, Jefferson and Nix, there could be a similarity between what their output is, but on the market, people are just more interested in Justin Jefferson, even though in Superflex, getting any one of these quarterbacks can be very difficult because we start to slide down the scale, and next thing you know, you're in Trevor Lawrenceville, Sam Darnold. It falls off so quick where the wide receiver line for production is just so much flatter as you travel sort of down the range of wide receivers. But let's go back to this for a sec. This was one that I think really irked Alexander because it had something to do with the trade calculator and the adjustment factor. And I think that just some things aren't being taken into account because they bring up keep trade cut, which is always going to be what we are compared to and other people are compared to. And as Alexander brought up to me offline, we have very similar situations with what our systems do.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that like we make an adjustment for players that we are, considered highly valuable assets. And so in this trade, we consider Daniels the number one player in Superflex. And why wouldn't he be, right? He had a ridiculous 2024. This is not taking in the bias with the, his injury and stuff like that and stuff, all that stuff. If you just look at him as a prospect, his age, his ability, what he could be for a long period of time, he's the most valuable player in the format. So we give a boost to guys like that because it should be hard to acquire these kind of guys. And like you said, Nate, there's a drop off when you hit a certain point within here. Even within the first tier of these guys with quarterback positions, how many guys are going to have elite rushing upside plus passing volume, right? And score tons of touchdowns, right? There's not very many guys within that range. It drops off significantly. You get into the elite pocket passers, right? You get into guys that are fringe rushers with some passing upside. You go down a tier significantly. So making it relatively difficult to acquire a player like Jaden Daniels makes sense to us because as dynasty players, these are elite assets that I don't feel comfortable moving off of. And I'm in dynasty for the long haul. I'm not trying to just go and win. If I have a slight injury to my superstar quarterback, I don't think that that's going to hinder him for the rest of his career. I don't feel like he's one of those guys that I should be moving off of. The guys I should be moving off of are the older players, older wide receivers, maybe older running backs that carry a little bit more value and moving into those. So when you throw in a trade like this into the calculator, I know the overcorrection and such, but I think that like the overcorrection also happens in our in Keep Trade Cut, which is like another tool that behaves similarly to the way our tool works. And I think that it just makes sense because Jaden Daniels is just that damn valuable.
Who is our number one player on the site?
Jaden Daniels.
Of course it's Jaden Daniels. Why wouldn't it be Jaden Daniels? What screen is this going to switch to? Did it work? Oh, where are we at?
We're just in the dunes now.
Yeah, we're just hanging out back here. Let's switch it back.
Oh,
that's a
so
big
amazing.
risk. Every time I do something like that, there's a risk that we don't come back. So just want to let everybody know that was took a chance there. But you're right. That was one of the big issues is people's thoughts. And I've heard people before talk about the correction factor. And to Alexander's point, like these players, again, recency bias it's been 2 weeks. Let's not do this. Let's really not do this. I mean, it's been 2 weeks and he's still averaging 19, 20 fantasy points a game. Sorry, he's not. He's 1 point. He is 1.6 fantasy points off of last season right now. What am I missing?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. So if you guys are using the website, use the trade calculator, you are going to run into a number of players, and a lot of them are going to have the gold crown. If you're looking at the rankings, they are the elite players in our system, and they're ones that obviously we deem highly valuable and the ones that we believe are going to be the most stable elite values there are. Like, we don't want to be the site that ranks a guy up here and then he misses a couple weeks and then we move him 17 and a half spots. Like, we don't want to be those guys. He shouldn't be up here if he could ever go way down here. Like, they shouldn't move that much. That's why Patrick Mahomes moved like 5 spots over 3 years. It's like he hasn't moved that much, and there's a reason for that. I think was there another comment that we were talking about? Do I have to click in somewhere?
I think it was the original guy who was kind of heckling us, talking about some players. I can't remember.
Yeah, and I don't remember who the player was, but so we've kind of revised some of what we had. So here's the deal. It was good because I got some messages from other people as well. And what we're going to do is add some more information to the site because ultimately our goal is to be very accurate. And we're going to find a way to validate our own accuracy relative to other people in the market. We're also going to find ways to help better describe what's going on within our rankings and formula. We're going to find better ways to list information for those of you that are using the trade calculator so you understand what our default settings are taking into account: PPR, 6-point passing touchdown, 3-year window, all these things, until we get to a point where we can update some of the features and account for how many teams are in your league, how many players are on your roster, are you a contender rebuilder, all these things. That's definitely a goal for us in the future. But for right now, we'll put an informational icon or something so that you guys can click it and get the info on just exactly what it is that we're doing within these rankings and the trade calculator. So with that said, Alexander, I know that we had a couple players coming out of last week that we wanted to talk about. We wanted to go through a couple of trades. Now, the Reddit post, while it wasn't great, the one thing that's really interesting is we had tens of thousands of people that had seen the post, and a ton of people decided to go to the website, because unlike the 4 or 5 people that decided to make a comment, the other thousands of people decided, why don't I just go try the trade calculator, and if I like it, I'll stick around, and if I don't, I'll just go back to whatever I was using. So a lot of you never said anything, but you went and used the trade calculator. So we have a number of trades that were executed, and Alexander has a list of players that I guess the most traded or the most tested tradable players that we saw. And I know right now in the market, there's a ton of guys that are in the frequent trade category. I know Joe Burrow recently jumped into that. We know that Krosky Merritt's been in that. So who are some of the people that we saw on our site that people were trying trades with?
Well, the number one guy in all of our deals, 71 times out of, we had probably over 1,600 unique trades since we announced the tool.
And that was 9 users, right?
Yeah, that was with you. Yeah, that was with users. And out of those trades, Amon-Ra St. Brown came out at number 1. Another interesting one, Joe Burrow, like we talked about with the injury news. Rashee Rice. Another one, Garrett Wilson. So top guys, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chase. I take out Chase and Lamb because I feel like those are guys that kind of are just getting fed into deals to kind of equal them out. Could be with Amon-Ra as well. But some of the interesting ones were Rashee Rice. Sounds like people are trying to buy in Rashee Rice. Justin Fields, who we talked about last week. Bill, who we talked about last week. And one of the other ones was Bo Nix. So there's a lot of guys who are trying to get into either getting out of these injury issues or trying to buy into, the tail end of Rashee Rice's suspension, sort of getting ahead of the curve here, trying to buy into guys like that. But Amon-Ra came out at number 1. I didn't time it whenever this has been since last Thursday. So I don't think Amon-Ra had a great game week 1. Week 2, obviously he exploded. So I was wondering if majority of those, and I could come back and check later. I'd like to do some sort of report to you all at some point, giving an outline of what these trades are going on in our calculator. But Amon-Ra is probably a buy, obviously, after that week 1. And so it could be that people were just going into it, trying to see if they could get him.
Yeah, it's interesting to see some of the names that popped up, because it's not what you would think. And it's always interesting to try to diagnose, why somebody is even considering moving off of a certain player. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown's just been so solid now. I mean, he's been a top 10 player for, right now he's wide receiver 4. So he's been top 10 4 years in a row, and he's been wide receiver 4 or better for 3 in a row, if you include where he's at presently. So it's just interesting when these players pop up, because you would expect more guys like Joe Burrow to pop up right now just because of the significance of the injury. And you and I had talked a little bit about Burrow and just some of the trades that were popping up around him, because dynasty managers are faced with a tough decision. Typically in Superflex, you probably have 3 quarterbacks. Some people might have 4. I know people quarterback hoard, but that means you've got like Geno Smith and God knows whoever on your roster. But with a guy like Burrow and these teams that are holding him, I know that you had brought up the proposition of what would it take to move off of Burrow. And I think your point of view is probably one that rings true for most people, which is you would have a difficult time moving off of Burrow at all. But knowing Burrow is injured for 3 months at least, does that change your opinion in terms of trying to be competitive in your dynasty league?
I guess if you're trying to be competitive, sure. But Joe Burrow is like an elite asset at the QB position. He's going to come back from this injury. It's going to be at the end of the season if they can, at least make a wild card. And he still will be Joe Burrow. He's been through a myriad of very difficult injuries, and he's come back. He's still relatively young. He's got a massive contract. He's got insane weapons. This team has just had a inefficient time trying to, and not even inefficient, it's just negligence, honestly, to not supply a very good offensive line around him. So moving off of him to try to remain competitive, I've seen trades with Joe Burrow for Jared Goff, J.K. Dobbins, and a first. So we could put that in the calculator, Nate, if you want.
Sure.
There's guys like that. Let me see another one while we're here. I just
said it was
I have a hard Goff, J.K. Dobbins, and a late first, 2027. See, like that, 27? It's like it's like I don't even even if we go pull it up on the calculator, it's just not a trade I would do. Like I would still be keeping Burrow. You're trying to remain competitive, but at what cost? Like there's only one champion, right? You make the playoffs, you make top 3, but then now all of a sudden you don't have Joe Burrow for forever. Otherwise, you're going to have to go buy him for probably a higher price because he's going to be healthy when you're trying to buy him. It's just not a trade that I feel like I would be going into.
It seems crazy, number one, that Jared Goff is only 2 years older than Joe Burrow. I feel like Goff's been in the league for hundreds of years longer than Joe Burrow. But yeah, exactly. Burrow just had a QB3 season last year with, over 40 passing touchdowns. It's just, I think it's the fear of so many injuries over the years. I mean, since being in the league, we've had a number of significant injuries that have cost him 6 or more games, and that's going to happen yet again this year. So 3 out of the 6 seasons that he's been in the league, he's missed at least 6 games. Offensive line is terrible. And like I said, I couldn't find the post, but somebody had mentioned that he's taken more sacks than Andrew Luck up to this point, I believe. And Andrew Luck eventually retired. Now, I'm not saying that anybody else would do that because there's been very few players that have decided to retire kind of at the prime of their career or early enough. But he does get hurt a lot. And this offensive line has been bad. And I know we keep saying it's coming. It's going to get better, but it just hasn't. So on the Burrow side of things, I agree because you really need to get somebody of significance back. And for me, I don't know, you almost have to climb into that Justin Herbert tier of quarterback plus. And I don't even know, like on our calculator, I just pulled it up just out of curiosity. Let's see, Herbert going 2026. Let's go 2026 late first. I mean, Justin Herbert late 26 first for Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
You're competitive this year. You've got to pick into the future. But again, I think the struggle just tends to be that, do we see Herbert get to the Burrow level? I mean, he's off to a hot start already. It's just one of those gambles. So I understand if somebody wants to hold Burrow, but I think you're a sinking ship. And for the person that wants to be competitive, it's hard to imagine you're essentially not going to be competitive for long enough this year that you don't make the playoffs. So unless you do something else, right, go rent Aaron Rodgers, you're not going to be competitive up to the point that you don't make the playoffs. So hopefully you own your own pick. I just don't know. It would be a tough position to be in to have to get off of Burrow. But again, either that or you go seek value. You're not taking a loss on Burrow, because now the guy that trades for Burrow, he gets to be the team that doesn't do well. His first round pick gets better. So I don't know if you'd want to send it across. So that's kind of the mentality. If you are the guy buying Burrow, you're sitting on this for, and they said it could be 3 months. I mean, that's significant.
Yeah, early to mid-December would be when he could be back. Yeah, not great.
Significant amount of time. So it's just interesting because I think it's certainly a trade does exist to move off of someone like Burrow. But the question you have to ask yourself is, if you want to hold on to Burrow, are you willing to just tank? And is your team designed to handle it? Because you're going to kind of have to work with your roster to sort of go along with whatever direction you're headed this year if you don't do anything about it. So I know a player that's also injured at quarterback. Speaking of taking victory laps and then immediately taking a nosedive straight back into the earth, JJ McCarthy was a player that after week 1 was being held at the highest regard. I mean, we're talking Hall of Fame in his future. But at this point in time, it's hard to say. He's got a 2 to 4 week ankle injury. And after the last performance that he put up, it's hard to say if he's a future Hall of Famer or the next Josh Rosen. I don't know.
Yeah, I was talking about this pre-show. I think for the amount of pass attempts that JJ McCarthy attempted in week 2, if he would have just kneeled on those, he would have had a higher passer rating. So 2-3 picks in one game, kind of looked lost. The injury doesn't help because it puts him further away from the game. I think this was always just the issue with him was he's kind of he played for a big time team, but they were a run heavy scheme, very, very averaging 22 pass attempts per game, and yards per attempts were relatively low. Only 22 touchdowns to 4 picks, and that was always the sell, right? The efficiency. You extrapolated over time that efficiency gets better. It's still to be seen, obviously, because these guys take time. I mean, there's players that have been first round quarterbacks that get better over time, but mixed results from week 1 to week 2, from especially week 1 against a Bears team that just allowed 52 points to the Detroit Lions. I've seen trades. One trade that was interesting was, again, unfortunately, I can't pinpoint at this point when the trade was made, but it could be someone buying into him or flipping. It would be Bo Nix. This one seems to me like Bo Nix. It's Bo Nix and Jamison Williams for McCarthy and a first. And this one feels to me like someone trying to potentially just flip. They don't like what they see. And, they think that they are moving off of Nix and moving into an ascending player like JJ McCarthy. That's what only makes sense. If I could go back and pinpoint the timestamp, I would. But this one feels like this was post week 1, right before the second week game, and they're trying to think that they're clever and moving off of Bo Nix because of the poor week 1 performance. To me, I'm still, like the calculator says, I'm still siding with the Bo Nix, Jamison Williams side. In fact, that trade, I should have said this, that's actually a late first in the calculator.
Oh,
so
it's late. Yeah, it's going to get even worse then.
Worse because the players just tear down so significantly on there. But I'm definitely on the Bo Nix, Jamison Williams side. And the week 1 versus week 2 for Bo Nix is just a shining example of it's only 1 or 2 weeks. Like, we don't know enough to make a definitive statement on these players, right? So,
well, we saw Bo Nix for an entire season last year, and he finishes a top 8 quarterback as a rookie. And I mean, an ultra impressive performance again with the weapons that he has. I guess that's the thing that I keep going back to. It's not like he has Justin Jefferson and other weapons in this offense. And I think that's part of the allure of McCarthy, right? I think that was part of why people were so high on him, because, you had to decide between, quarterbacks at that range in your rookie drafts, and people were erring on the side of, well, he's going to play with Justin Jefferson. And I think there seems to be a ton of questions around him, and I'm sure confidence has been shaken for people. So, yeah, Bo Nix and him are not in the same class. What's interesting, though, is on Keep Trade Cut, I was going to try and pull this up real quick. I think on Keep Trade Cut, they have him at QB. What's your guess?
QB 17.
Ooh, close. QB 16, but they have him ahead of Cam Ward. And I think for a lot of people out there, they're already on the Cam Ward train over the McCarthy train. So yeah, it's just a really interesting case, and I wish we had more trades that we could pull up. And this is part of what Alexander and I were talking about. We're looking at what's in our own trade calculator. I just think it's interesting that what does 1 week do? You go from this week where everybody thinks you look like the next great quarterback to just an absolutely awful game. Such a game of regression. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, this just makes me question. It's like, how do evaluators, look at these players like these kind of like JJ McCarthy to me is like sort of a black box prospect. He's got the size, he's got some arm talent, right? He's got athleticism to run, and we're banking on the situation in the draft capital, but we're ignoring like the major red flags. Like the situation should outweigh the player's profile, where it coming from an offense where he wasn't very significantly, a very high passing volume team, to going into the NFL where you have to pass to win. You're not going to you end up being these game managers, and that's where it's like, what's the ceiling, for a guy that doesn't come from this type of offense and has never really done it until now. We're saying, well, Justin Jefferson should help him out, Jordan Addison. And it does to an extent, but sometimes I feel like we sometimes go over a situation over the prospect itself.
Well, isn't part of it also that, you got Kevin O'Connell and it's Kirk Cousins and then it's Sam Darnold. And if it worked for Sam Darnold, it's got to work for JJ McCarthy. Like, that's definitely part of it. Like, that is 100% part of what is being baked into this evaluation. And that's not to say that JJ McCarthy won't be fine, but I think we've seen enough now to have questions about, okay, is he going to right the ship? And what does this look like 4 or 5 weeks from now? And how long is a team that's a competitive football team, like how long are they going to be willing to sort of put up with the shakiness of this? It's one of the more difficult things when you are a good football team, and you end up with a quarterback like this, kind of a project. And it's like, this is the battle that some of these other rosters have had in the past, where you go to Daniel Jones instead of Anthony Richardson because winning means more than developing your quarterback, unfortunately. And, it's yet to be determined what happens here, but there's always the potential for some real fun to come out of this one. The next player, this was one that I put on here that I think it's hilarious because I think on Keep Trade Cut, he's like the wide receiver 4 million, but he's probably rising now. Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, I remember doing a tweet last year about his 2024 production because it was so odd. He had 140 targets, but he had less than 700 receiving yards, which is one of the strangest statistics I had ever heard in my entire life. But he's performed so well in the first 2 weeks, and his opportunity has been so strong that he has to be on the radar for people now. And you have to seriously start to take stock in the fact that maybe with the change in quarterback, with the way that this offense is functioning, just maybe this guy has some legitimacy to the performance that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And I think when I pulled it, we had Wan'Dale Robinson, albeit wide receiver 52. Market had him at wide receiver 75 or 77. So I think sometimes, like with these guys, and that's part of the algorithm that we've built in, age is a benefit to these guys because they get more chances. Teams are willing to give more opportunity, especially guys that are, I can't remember, Wan'Dale probably at a second year of his deal. Got to be, right, at this point. Or at the end of it, where these guys still have a shot because they're taking so much time to develop. He's not even 25 years old.
Yeah, he's young.
So there's a shot that there's a guy, and he averaged 10.5 fantasy points, got a better quarterback, like passing volume wise, right? So he's got Russell Wilson is arguably a more efficient passer on paper than Daniel Jones, kind of fits more of that Brian Daboll scheme. I just think that that's why age is a benefit. And that's why we take that into account when we look at some of these players, because it gives them more opportunity because they're still young enough that they're learning the position. So they're more valuable because there's a shot that, for example, Wan'Dale Robinson can all of a sudden in later year, a few years outside of his rookie deal, he ends up being a valuable player in Dynasty.
I thought about this, and it's funny because people say targets are earned unless it's 2024 Wan'Dale Robinson, right? Like, he didn't earn those targets. He didn't deserve it, even though Neighbors had 170 in 15 games. Wan'Dale didn't earn his. But it's interesting because he's averaging, 9 targets a game right now, 14.1 yards per reception, and that's up from the 7.5 that we saw from him last year. Like, oh, this is who he could be. And I drafted him in a number of leagues, including the Scott Fish Bowl, because he had 140 targets last year. Like, there's plenty of targets to go around. It's amazing to see this. And what's even more interesting, and bear in mind, this is all while playing with Malik Neighbors, because we've talked about this before. Typically, this should be a death sentence. Devonta Smith is averaging 4.5 targets per game. A.J. Brown's over there. T. Higgins is averaging 6 targets per game. Chase is over there. If you go back to last year with Jordan Addison, 6.6 targets per game. Wan'Dale's averaging 9 targets a game. Like, he's being treated like a wide receiver 1 in terms of volume. He's like fringe right there. And these other guys are clearly getting wide receiver 2 volume. And this is all while he was the wide receiver 76 on Keep Trade Cut, or somewhere in that range. And again, you can see on here his market value across all market consensus, 77.5. As Alexander said, we have him at 52. Obviously, our rankings need to adjust because of the new data that's come in. But it's pretty amazing to see. And I think he's one of those players that at this point in time with Russell Wilson, I'm buying into the performance. I think the utilization is going to persist. I think the way that he's being deployed on the field is what we were hoping for. And I just think that he was such a buy low coming into the year, because you could have got him for essentially nothing because nobody believed in him. And I have a lot of guys on my roster. Like, okay, for instance, right now, George Pickens, Wan'Dale Robinson, don't know the matchup next week. If you didn't know, who would you start at this point? Like, are you starting Wan'Dale over Pickens?
It's a conversation now at this point, at least.
It
right?
wasn't
Like,
before.
I mean, it wasn't before. I mean, Wan'Dale was a 2nd-round pick, though, too, right? Like,
he's got a high
2022.
Yep.
Yeah, he wasn't like a 5th-round guy. I think that's why he's still stuck around, albeit having such, very, very poor production, right? Because of the minimal yards per target. I think that, I think it's a conversation now because of the how many targets he's getting in the first 2 weeks. It's crazy.
No, it is. It's very crazy. And so that's just one of those guys that popped up and on our rankings, obviously he's going to have to climb because there's a number of guys here at this point in time that I think he could be moved over, but it's a conversation because the higher we go up, it's like, well, and I know you're not the biggest Olave fan, so you're probably like, put him over Olave. But nonetheless, I think that he's an interesting name in dynasty leagues right now because of the performance that we're seeing, the opportunity that we're seeing, the utilization. So 9 targets a game, man. I don't know what to tell you.
9 targets a game.
I don't
Again, it also, to be devil's advocate, it's 2 weeks, right? So this could even out, regress to the mean here. But that's why I think that's why we slowly evolve and update the data over time, because we don't want to jump to these irrational conclusions. Then all of a sudden we're going to rank Wan'Dale over George Pickens. But now it's a conversation because through 2 weeks we have more data to suggest that Wan'Dale might have, broken out in this situation, right? And he's this kind of player, right? He's going to be in that conversation. When he was, in the market, he was almost wide receiver 80 at this point, even at 24, 27, 25 years old. So,
well, I think, but it goes to the thing that I was talking to you about when we were talking about what was the Daniel Jones versus whoever conversation.
It was Daniel Jones versus DK. Like, the argument from the Reddit post was DK was equal to Javonte and also Daniel Jones.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I guess what I was going to say, on the Wan'Dale thing, if, take whatever player you want, but if I told you that Wan'Dale's opportunity was going to sustain through the rest of the year, like this was going to persist, number one, he'd be ranked way higher. And number two, you would probably say, oh, well, I would take him over, and you would name some names that right now you wouldn't dare utter out loud for fear of being ridiculed. But I guess the thing is, we don't know if he falls off, but everybody, to your point, is probably assuming that, hey, this is Wan'Dale and he's going to fall off. But again, I don't know why he would, because the only reason that his numbers weren't better last year is because the utilization and the depth of target was so shallow that he wasn't really doing anything with the ball. And here we are this year with the same target distribution as last year, but a different utilization. It's just, sometimes I just don't understand. I guess I don't get it.
I think sometimes that's just chalks up to like just situations drastically change in the NFL, and each year sometimes can be completely different. And these are one of those guys that I bet you nobody was that high on Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, the market had him at wide receiver 77. So like nobody was on this. Nobody thought the yards per attempt. This is going into year 4 of his rookie deal. Everyone thought that this is who he was, right? Yeah. So,
okay, here's one for you. It's a riddle. What wide receiver finishes the wide receiver 11 last year in points per game, but is the wide receiver 53 this year?
Oh. Hold on.
Oh, look at this.
You might pull up the Harry Potter shirt. I might need some help. Is it Brian Thomas Jr.?
I just threw my back out. Yeah, it is Brian Thomas Jr. You got it. I don't have, you know what? I got to work on this. Does this work? There's some really bad noises on here. I haven't got to some of the good ones yet. Oh, you know what? Yeah, there's a couple good ones that I'm still savoring. I'm not ready yet. It's going to have to be like week 7 before I break these out. But yeah, Brian Thomas, it's interesting. Everybody said that, draft Travis Hunter highly. He's going to have this like breakout year, despite the fact that, like we talked about, there's this historical rookie season by the guy across from him, already a first-round pick. Drafted Travis Hunter, claimed that he was probably going to play some defensive snaps. Oh, he did. But now, neither guy is really doing anything. And there seems to be a fear growing around Brian Thomas because so far through the year, 2 games, 9 or less fantasy points per game, despite the fact that his targets have been 7 and 12. And he has 19 targets in 2 games.
Yeah, the inefficiencies, pretty concerning. We didn't really have too many trades in our calculator because I don't think anyone wants to move off of him, right? I think the brand equity associated with him, right? The usage and the performance of last season, people are not freaking out about a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., right? So Andy's got the target, so I think that's what really is giving people probably a little bit of comfort in knowing that's what, he's still getting targets. So it's not like he's not garnering targets and, Travis Hunter has taken over this receiving core. I think it's more of just like the efficiency with either the quarterback or, there's some clips on social media that have him dropping the balls, in situations, or I've seen stuff where people are saying he's scared to get hit. I saw one thing where Liam Cohen was saying that he was hurt. This is a guy that we have highly rated. He's garnering the targets. I think this is one of those overreactions to these situations where they start off slow. And I would argue that, and I'd be willing to bet that Brian Thomas ends up back into the category of 16.5 fantasy points per game like he was last year.
Right now, Trevor Lawrence, clean pocket completion percentage, 58.6 QB 27. Now, I don't know if that's drops. He's number 4 in drops, 3 drop passes. It's weird because his pressured completion percentage, 100%. Now, obviously, it's early in the year, so these numbers are going to be a lot more extreme. But deep ball, catchable pass rate, number 24 in the league. Let's see here. Yeah, clean pocket, catchable catch rate, number 19. So Trevor Lawrence hasn't been the best either along the way. And I know that Trevor Lawrence he hasn't climbed back up into the ranks of the dynasty world in a long, long time. And it seems like he should be teed up to do so. But the way that this offense is functioning right now and what we've seen, 16.3 fantasy points per game, QB 22, but 16.3 fantasy points per game would be what? The third highest that Lawrence has ever had. Lawrence has never had an 18-point fantasy season yet. And you would think that there would be a rise with these two players, but what's really interesting, I was thinking about this, how many teams have ever taken a player as early as they took Travis Hunter? And again, I definitely think two-way player is 1,000% what was in their mind. But how many times have they done that, and then that guy did not end up the wide receiver 1 in the future? Like, how often is a guy being drafted that high, a top 2 pick in the NFL?
That actually is a crazy question. I really, I thought about it, but like in terms of I thought he was going to be DB. I didn't think that he was going to play enough. I didn't think he was going to even get this many snaps. I thought he was going to be a full-time corner, situational wide receiver. It obviously flipped, but that's a great question. I mean, there's guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake London, guys who drafted in the top 10, top of their position. I mean, Jeremiah Love's going to be one of the guys, or not Jeremiah Love, excuse me, Jeremiah Smith is going to be one of those guys that's in a similar fashion, drafted top 10, top 5, and there'll be no-brainer wide receiver 1s. I can't envision a scenario unless Brian Thomas just disappears entirely that Travis Hunter even garners enough to be a high-end wide receiver 2.
Yeah, it's unprecedented, but it's one of those things. And again, we haven't seen enough yet, but we knew it all along that it would be far too difficult to do both. And there doesn't really exist historically a player that ever did this. So with that being said, my fear is not that Brian Thomas is going to lose his opportunities to Travis Hunter per se. We talked about this before. Travis Hunter is going to have a big game. It's going to happen. He's going to have good players. He's a talented wide receiver. A blow-up game is definitely coming. He's probably going to have a game where he does something amazing on both sides of the ball.
Right.
But with that being said, I think you're exactly right. It's funny. While we talk about some other players like Wan'Dale, where it's a myth, he can't possibly be this good. It's like on the Brian Hunter side, it's like, well, it's a myth. He can't possibly be this bad. So it's just funny how we automatically assume one or the other, despite the fact that there's information both directions. So I'm in the same boat. I'm not moving off of Brian Thomas. I imagine it makes him somewhat of a buy low, but who's really selling, like you mentioned? Nobody's selling Brian Thomas cheap right now unless you're going to give him somebody where it's a slight tier down to somebody close and he's getting paid something reasonable on top of it. But I'm not moving off of him. We have him together in a league, and I'm just going to keep starting him. He's getting the target, so we're hoping that the bounce back is somewhere around the corner.
Absolutely.
Let's jump to our last player because we kind of got a late start here, so we're gonna skip ahead to one. And this is a player that it might be doghoused, and I don't know how long he's doghoused for. Even though Fusuvu continues to say he's a buy, and he seems to be posting it from 1 a.m. till till midnight the next night, just all night, no sleep, constantly tweeting. He's buy low, buy him now. Kaleb Johnson with the Steelers. It's really hard to truthfully call a running back a bust this early. We just don't know. We've seen running backs that didn't play until year 2. I mean, Derrick Henry was behind a 29-year-old DeMarco Murray, right? Yeah. He was getting half the carries because DeMarco existed. We've seen running backs not play much in year 1, if at all. We've seen running backs play well in year 2. We've seen running backs stink in year 2. We've seen running backs like Toby Gerhart get shelved for their entire life behind an Adrian Peterson. But Kaleb Johnson, after an issue on kick return and a fumble the week prior, Mike Tomlin basically said, hey, we're taking him off kick return duties, and he's got a chance to earn his rollback. But he was already barely getting work. And historically speaking, Tomlin did this to Rashard Mendenhall back in the day, and Jonathan Dwyer and Isaac Redmond were the running backs in front of him. 2 running backs, not that good, by the way. So it's not like a totally different situation now. He doesn't have Le'Veon Bell in his prime in front of him. So what are we doing with Kaleb Johnson? Because it sounds like, despite being one of the best tackle breakers in the class and having a lot of like really great advanced metrics as a rusher coming out of college, now we've got this 3rd round running back in this offense that historically has yielded one single phenomenal running back. Is he still a buy low? Should we wait a little longer and let the fear build, or what?
I think there's a likelihood that the fear is going to continue to build, because we got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback here, and he does not trust rookies, right? Consistently. I think that's part of the reason probably why we've seen a lot more Jaylen Warren. I think Jaylen Warren has looked explosive. He got the contract extension, which was a very big surprise for us. So he's going to be here for a few years. I don't know if you have the contract up, but it's not boding well so far, obviously, because Kaleb Johnson, like you said, has a fantastic profile. He had a 99th percentile college dominator, 6.4 yards per carry. He had a decent college target share as well, 82nd percentile. He didn't have the crazy 40 speed, but like all the other metrics were fantastic. Yards after contact, the size, 6'1", 224. So if you put into context the 4.5 speed, he's one of those guys that we consistently go and buy. But the question is like, when is he going to? I think you just wait. Like I think you can probably get him for cheap. There's a potential that, bearing a Jaylen Warren injury, which probably is going to happen, because he's a smaller running back. I think he's had an lengthy injury history in the past. That's why he never was able to take the job away from Najee. I think Kaleb Johnson is just one of those guys that I would wait on, but he has a great profile. Fusuvu absolutely loves him, but outside of just like that context of one person, the profile itself for him is fantastic. But if he's making major mental mistakes for a big time veteran head coach with, a quarterback that's notably does not trust rookies, I don't know how he sees the field very often other than a Jaylen Warren injury. So I would wait.
That contract, looks like there's an out in 26, about $4 million in dead cap. Jaylen Warren's been great, and he's been a journeyman back for this offense, and he's performed well, and he's done everything Tomlin needed him to do. And I have literally, I have assumed he was going to fail at every turn, and that doesn't seem to be happening.
He will not die.
No, he won't. But, the thing is, Kaleb Johnson did have a very impressive college profile, right? And when you look at
profile,
it's great. And when you look at like Mock Draftable and some of these other websites, he's pretty close to like a Najee Harris, athletic, measurable size, mix. There is some similarity there. So you could see why they liked it. This is not the first running back that's gone through this in Pittsburgh, but I think it's a great point on the Aaron Rodgers thing, because I know Aaron Rodgers he's not going to put up with much of it, but I believe that, like you're saying, I believe that we're going to see a longer period of time where his workload is diminished. His opportunity will come around. There's no way that this guy never plays. There's just no chance that he doesn't play, but beat reporters, they're saying he needs to be benched. They're talking about carrying a different running back for the third back that suits up, like literally like inactive, which sounds crazy on the surface. If he is a healthy scratch one day, now we have a whole new problem.
Right.
We haven't gone that far before, but historically speaking, there are plenty of third-round running backs who never really took off, and this is the sad reality. You think about the Ty Montgomerys, Trey Sermon, who I think is on that same roster, by the way. Tyrion Davis-Price, nobody ever heard from him. Keyshawn Vaughn. I mean, there are so many names of running backs that just didn't fire, and you would hate for the reason that they did. And not a lot of those guys were ever behind anybody elite, And
Yeah.
so you hope that you never get phased out. But again, it's 2 games. Couldn't be worse circumstances. But it's definitely got to be wait and see. It's way too early in the year. If this guy hasn't played hardly at all by week 6, 7, 8, yeah, that's probably time to panic a little bit. But you're hard-pressed to find a running back that never got to play. And he's hardly played yet. They have to see what they have before they're just going to dismiss a third-round guy. So I would say wait and see, and I would buy the FOMO in the future if it's low enough.
Absolutely.
I could see people turning him for. I mean, it's a good question. If I had
Second
Kaleb,
round pick?
yeah, I think second is probably where most people are going to err when they get to that fever pitch of the fear of what could be. But again, this guy's got a 4-year contract. We're 2 games into the first year. Like, we got to pump the brakes a little bit. This is very clear overreaction.
Yeah, these guys are, forget, like, these rookies are like 22, 21 years old. Like, yeah, so they're trying to figure out the game, right? He came from playing in college to playing in the pros. It takes some time for a lot of these guys. I remember, I'm not comparing Kaleb Johnson 1-for-1 as a prospect as Jonathan Taylor, but I was told that Jonathan Taylor, by mid-year of his rookie year, that he was Trent Richardson. He was one of the biggest busts of all time, and I just watched him score 29 fantasy points last week against the Denver Broncos, number 1 defense rated by most people. So Kaleb Johnson, I think you got to wait a little bit. Obviously, if you own him, I wouldn't sell him. I would give it at least a year to see, like, if you at the tail end of the season, if they end up not being competitive because they have such a aging roster that these guys get banged up that they don't have enough juice by the end of the season and they're not making the playoffs, which, traditionally they're always in the playoff run because 8-8 or 500 is the Mike Tomlin way. And Kaleb Johnson, I think that we will get some looks from him later in the season, and I would not panic sell right now at all.
I was just curious. I wanted to look up Kaleb Johnson's recruiting profile because they had him. Yeah, I mean, I was looking. He hasn't really kick returned since 2022. And I'm like, was he like 20 pounds lighter back then when he was kick returning? He's a big dude to be returning kicks too. So, anyways, I think that there's just a lot of fear. We're 2 weeks in, and you definitely shouldn't overreact. Your fantasy team is not doomed 2 weeks in, and we don't know who these players are 2 weeks in, but you do need to treat some of this as signal along the way because there is plenty of data, whether it's usage in Pittsburgh or, again, some of these other players' performance on the field. You've got to tally all of it. So anyways, Alexander, you did it, man. You made it through your second show. Less prepared this time than the previous. I swear to God, next week we are coming back with show graphics, sounders, social media call out, everything. I've got buttons I haven't even pushed, and I'm going to push one of them next week just to let you guys know that I'm not messing around out here. So thanks for listening, and check back in next week. These episodes will continue to drop every Thursday morning, as well as the YouTube video. And if you're a Spotify user, you guys will see the video there as well. And for those of you that let me know that you were unable to tell what we were doing because we were just putting trades on the screen and not describing them, I think we did better this time, but we'll continue to pay attention to that. And everybody on Reddit, I won't be back for a long, 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 long time. See ya.
See ya.